Alright guys, it's me Stark and I'm here today to talk about a very special and a very unique civilization, the Cumans. I think that the Cumans can be strong in both 1v1 and team games, and honestly they do have one feature that makes them different from every other civilization on the game. The Cumans on the start have no other economical bonuses. They actually have access to cheaper archer ranges and stables, so basically you do receive like 100 wood saving upon making your archer range or your stable. So let's say that you just open it stable, it only costs 100 wood. Let's say that you just added as well an archer range. It only costs 100 wood. So 150 wood saving. So that's an indirect saving and honestly not so good. So you can play regularly with the Cumans. But the biggest thing that the Cumans can do that changes everything is having access to a second town center during the feudal age. So if the Cuman player wants, and if the Cuman player managed to, he can actually add a secondary town center. Let's take a look on this regular Arabia game. The Cuman player already is thinking about, okay, maybe I can defend myself, and then I can go for the secondary town center. In order to help the Cuman defending itself, the Cuman have extra HP on their palisades, basically 33% extra HP, and that also applies to every palisade of your teammates. So this can be quite crafty. The downside of it is that the Cumans actually have no access to stone walls. So like the God, we also have this civilization that cannot fully wall themselves, and honestly it makes all sense. Else Cuman players could just go like all in stone, try to wall themselves and boom during the feudal age. So the biggest thing about the Cuman is you need to boom during the feudal age, but if you are playing a map different from Arena, for example, your opponents are surely going to attack you with other armies, so you need to somehow survive. So there are two ways of booming here as the Cuman on an open map. You can actually already drop a second TC and try to open with it, or you can actually try to open some kind of army, counter your opponent's initial army, and then transition into the TC. On this specific game, you can see Jibatong playing here as the Cuman. He is already playing with the gold, he's dropping the barracks, and remember, his archer range only costs 100 wood. So he drops an archer range upon seeing that his opponent is attacking him with some militia and scouts, and he's getting ready to add himself some archers. After adding some archers, Jibatong will be able to counter his opponent, and once his opponent is countered, he can now think about booming with a secondary TC. The key to boom with the two TCs as the Cuman is to have a constant production of food that can sustain both town centers. In order to achieve that, you actually need to have at least 6 villagers on food per town center. If you do manage to get your TC on a source of food like these berries, these 6 villagers can sustain this town center alone. So all that you need is to add 6 more farms on the other TC. So this is very important because those 12 initial views on food is just the minimum amount necessary to keep the TC running. But the biggest difference here is that once you are booming here with 2 TCs, your opponent is unlikely to catch you up on the boom. So you can basically just buy time with your army. You don't even need to kill the enemy here, but after you do buy time, you are actually already opening here some good advantage regarding the view count. So often the players will just click Castle Age after they have around 50 views. A regular player will usually go for like something between 30 and 40 views by the time he clicks to Castle Age. So we can basically argue that the Cuman can get something like 10 at minimum, maybe 15, maybe 20 view advantage versus a guy that is just playing regularly. And the longer the feudal age gets, the better it is for the Cuman because he is slowly outbooming his opponent. Adding a market to get extra gold and boost your uptime is usually a good idea. The Cuman technology tree here is very wide, but especially good for mounted units. So all the mounted units from the Cumans move 5, 10 and 50% faster, so basically they scale starting from feudal age. And I think that my personal advice for the Cuman is play knights. use your better economy combined with knights. But the stable from the Cumans is pretty much complete. They have access to light cavalry, knight, camel rider, step lancer. During the castle age you can do whatever you want. But of course, if you want to units that scale better, your knights do scale until paladin and have all the upgrades. So 2TCs into boom and then later knights is a very popular approach for the civilization, which obviously can still play with like Cav archers, can still play with their unique units, the Keep Check, a very special Cav archer from the Cumans. The only downside of both Keep Check and Cav archers is that the Cuman civilization has no access to Bracer, so they actually have to play with 6 range Cav archers even during the Imperial Age. With that said, this is the WTC boom, this is the core game from the Cuman, and this is something that you should be trying to do with the civilization. Sometimes you can manage to pull that off on Arabia, but honestly this is way better for closed maps where the enemy might have some trouble to actually punish you before you do that. Alright guys, so once again, let's also talk about the Cumans and let's show a case where the Cuman boom is not that good. This is the map African Clearing. So on African Clearing you actually can place the RTC here closer to, sorry, not African Clearing, it's Bedouins, very similar but different. It's basically a very open map where you do have access here to the pound and you can actually collect fish from those pounds. So we have here Vivi playing as the Cumans against Nikov playing as the Chinese. So on this map, as you can see, there is plenty amount of food available for the players. He can get food here from those shore fishes, he can get meal and make a meal on your shore fishers, and there are also several boars that you can take. So on this map you can obviously try to go for the Cuman WTC. The problem is you need to make sure that you are not gonna get your eco so disrupted, and obviously having access to fish allow your opponent to catch up faster. So Cuman's going to the next stage. He's about to drop his new town center, he has chosen a spot, so Cuman idea here is pretty simple. He wants to drop a town center that will allow him to get this pound and also access the gold and access the stone. So basically a perfect town center. So far so good, right? And the Cuman also has a huge amount of food on the bank and he also is getting all the upgrades. Of course, he can also complement his booming here with walls, and once he collects his initial 30 wood, he can even start to drop towers, right? Well, not that simple. His opponent just lamed him, so he did lose a significant amount of food that he was counting on from those ships. The opponent is already adding a tower, and well, as the Cuman, if you build the town center, you initially do not have enough stone to make a defensive tower. So this is another downside. If you started to get forwarded or towered as the Cuman, unless you did pick 30 stone on the way to feudal age, and because you already expected something, you cannot produce the tower, forcing you to collect stone before making the tower. The problem is this will often not be made in time, and your opponent might actually drop down his tower, which will cause you a lot of idle time. So if you do have a lot of idle time, things can actually get bad for the Cuman player. Enemy might be constantly hitting your economy, idling your food eco, especially if you are making no army. If you're making no army, one of the biggest threats is that your opponent starts to surround your town centers with archers and deny you from collecting food. This is probably one of the biggest Cuman's nightmare, and the Cuman is completely out of timing in case he tries to go for barracks and drop in ranges, because he will be struggling here to get access to the food. With that in mind, one of the things that the Cuman usually does here in order to try to boom and escape from all this pressure is adding a few towers. The problem is, if the map is way too open, your opponent will just keep walking by, avoiding the tower and hitting you somewhere else. With one skirmisher or one archer, your opponent can already stop a farm. Look at this game. The Chinese player is basically surrounding the Cuman one with multiple archers, denying him to collect food. He's basically struggling and not managing to collect enough food. He's not managing to do defensive towers. He's having like a lot of idle time. Most of those villagers are not working and all the farms are under siege. So this, guys, is one of the downsides of the Cuman. If you try to go for this full boom on the open map, you can get surrounded by feudal age army and that might not work. So this is probably the biggest problem, the biggest concern for the Cuman civilization. Very annoying to play like this. You are always struggling, always trying to find some way of getting resources, and usually one thing that's very common to happen for the Cuman player is that your opponent is actually reach castle age faster. Not only because he's dealing a lot of damage to you, but because you are actually trying to sustain 2 DCs. So despite having an civilization view advantage here, the Cumans will not always have an easy game and might actually suffer a lot on the early castle age. Like in this game, the Cuman is getting surrounded by crossmen, raiding by knights, pushed by rocket carts, eventually losing to his demise. How about we see a scenario where the Cumans can actually shine, a map that is actually designed a lot more for civilizations like the Cumans, and we are talking about Arena. On this map, for example, the Cuman is not going to get disrupted. In order to attack or try to disrupt the Cuman, the player has to go through a stone wall. So this means that the Cuman will have plenty of time to actually improve its gameplay. So let's take a look on one way of playing the Cumans here. Pretty much you want to go up as fast as possible with the civilization. Already choose where you want to drop your town center. The best places are usually big woodlines with access to a secondary resource. So right here, as you can see, there is a big woodline with access to the stone. Not only the Cuman will already start booming here by making his eco upgrades and of course managing to get at least 12 villagers on foot, but there are also other things that the Cuman can do. So if you are playing a map like Arena and you know that your opponent is going for a fast castle, you can also delay him by not only booming 2 TCs but also combining that with a small tower rush. Getting a TC here on the stone, as soon as you get like your initial 30 stone, you are actually going to have enough resources to drop a tower. So not only you are booming during the feudal age, but you can already start pressuring your opponent using towers. This will buy map and this will actually force your opponent to react defensively. By making towers, you are forcing your opponent to make defenses, to make walls, to avoid your towers, or even to waste his precious stone with defensive towers. And while doing that, the Cuman can just develop. After having the minimum of 12 villagers on food, what you want to do is to keep pumping up villagers and making farms and developing so that you can play on the next age. It's very annoying to play the Cuman, and with a small amount of views, the Cuman can actually force you to waste like a lot of resources. As you can see, Cuman is bypassing here the second layer, forcing the enemy to go for a more defensive castle. You might wonder, oh Stark, the Cuman hasn't achieved anything. Well, if the Cuman just played way too passive, this castle wouldn't have been built here on the Burgundian player's base. Instead, this castle would most likely be here, in the front of the Cuman player, and the army would be already hitting the Cuman. Let's talk a bit now about the castle age options. As I said, there have two favorite options to play as the Cuman on the castle age. The first of them being the knights, for obvious reasons. But the second one, and the one that I honestly feel that has a lot of potential, is playing with the keep checks. So after doing your initial boom, you were probably ahead of your opponent. All you have to do is to drop a castle and then start doing the keep checks. A few camos can also be helpful here to defend from the enemy, and once you have the castle, you can start going for the keep checks, which is a cav archer that shoots multiple arrows. So basically, as you can see, this is a fight from the keep checks, killing from the distance and dealing heavy damage here to their nemesis. Keep checks are a regular cav archer unit with some extra attack here versus siege because of the extra arrows, so they are pretty crafty, and basically you can just combine a small keep checks production with a huge boom behind it, using a lot of TCs and upgrades from starting with the 2 TC. Let's move towards the Imperial Age to see how this actually behaves and what other units can be used. One of the most popular combinations here for the Cuman is to play similar to Cavarter Civs and similar to Mongols, which is basically using a combination of Kipchaks as their Cavarter unit and Russars. Not only that, but the Cuman can also use Steppe Husbandry to help him. Steppe Husbandry is an upgrade that will just increase in 100% the production speed of light horsemen, including light cavalry and steppe lancer, and also cavarters. So if you do this, it can be pretty good. Another good approach here for the Cuman is to actually going for multiple castles, not only a small number of Kipchaks, but also forward castle drops. And using these forward castle drops, the Cuman can force Imperial Age fights where it actually tries to benefit itself from its own economy in the early Imperial Age game. As you can see right here, the Kipchaks are basically keeping the control over the map. In order to upgrade your Kipchaks, you just need to use any other upgrades that you usually use for the Cavarters. So Bloodlines, all the archer ranges 1, Ballistics, Thumb Ring, and of course, Kipchaks are great as long as you're keeping the distance. If you can keep the distance, they're good. If you cannot, they are paper. Exactly that, guys. Then it's basically adapting your Kipchaks as a core unit plus other units here to support. Are you going to play against some Revi cavalry or camels? Perhaps you actually want to go for the halberdiers. Are you going to play against ranged units or even siege? Perhaps we want to go for the Russars. So choosing your other unit is good, and basically that's how the Cuman wants to play. Once fully upgraded, the Kipchak stats are pretty good. Right here, as you can see, you do have Kipchaks with 6 pierce defense, 4 melee armor, so they can be quite crafty here as a Civ, and basically are affected by every upgrade that do affect a regular Cavarter. So if you are Cuman, avoid the regular Cavarter and try to play with the Kipchak. Great synergy here with the Tutisibon, and one of the best army compositions that you can have for the civilization. Kipchak plus something, either Russar or Halberdiers. On these specific situations, the Russars would actually melt against the Couturier, while the Halberdiers, well, they actually deal a very significant amount of damage. So in this specific scenario, Kipchak plus Halberdier looks pretty good. Since the Cumans have no bracer, I would say that the upgrade that you want to give priority once reaching Imperial Age is the chemistry, which will increase 1 flat attack here for the Kipchaks. And that's basically the idea. On its elite version, the Kipchak shoots 3 arrows here and goes towards 65 HP, being a very difficult to deal unit as long as you mask and keep them safe. And of course, as long as you also choose the correct unit composition according to the situation. Are you repeating once again, are you playing against ranged units or siege? Go for the Russar. Are you playing against some Revi camels or Revi cavalry? Halberdiers can be helpful. But the biggest thing about the Cuman and the truth behind their strength is not their units, but rather the eco behind it. Honestly, many civilizations, if not all, have better technology trees and better units than the Cumans. What truly changes the game is the fact that they can actually do it a lot faster thanks to the double disable. So Cuman 2TC is truly crafty, and there are some specific maps, and especially tournament ones, where the Cumans can actually shine. For example, for the TTL, the Titans League, there's a map called Dzong. In Dzong, you were actually born here within this small arena, and under your initial forest, there are 2 shrines. And on these shrines, you can actually train a unit called priest, and this priest can actually collect relics. His only function here is to collect relics. So basically it is like a feudal age version of a monk. So some players were actually fighting for the relics during the feudal age. The idea was quite simple. During the dark age, you cut down the trees towards this shrine. once you are on the feudal age, you actually produce one of these priests, and using your Cuman scout that not only walk faster, but you are probably going to be on the feudal age while your opponent's trying to go for a fast castle build, you actually use this small leverage to go there and try to take on the relics. Obviously, what the Cuman wants to do here is to boom with 2TCs. For obvious reasons, we already discussed why this is so strong. Since you were fully walled, you were obviously not gonna get disrupted. Your walls have already 1800 HP, so they have like the castle age HP, which means that they can be quite powerful. And of course, in order to protect your monks from enemy units, one thing that the Cuman player can do is, after setting up his initial 2 town centers and 12 villagers on food, starting to add feudal age buildings to make some small feudal age army just to escort, this priest. And the idea here is quite simple. Spearmen that can actually deal with enemy scouts and cave archers, combined with a few scouts that you can actually use to snipe enemy monks. So that's basically what you want to do. And of course, you cannot yet drop these on the shrines, those are not monasteries, so the best you can do here is to take already all the 5 relics there. So Cumans are quite popular, and they were being used here to punish even other civilizations going for fast castle. For example, on this game we do have a third player actually setting up here a fast imperial age. As you can see, he's going towards the castle age with 28 views, and he has a lot of resources, so soon he's gonna be able to click towards the castle age. He's already dropping both siege workshop and university, and meanwhile the Cuman is getting all the relics, scouting his units while booming. So you can actually even fight for the relics on this map while on feudal age for having the Cuman Civilization. The biggest thing here about the Cuman is that they are actually going to develop their economy. I don't know the exactly math economy, the math equation here for Cuman versus other civilizations, but basically you are going to have a minimum of 20 villagers advantage versus the enemies. Já tá chegando. So basically what the Cuman wants to do here is to go towards the next age by dropping several stables. As you can see here, 3 stables, and by the time your enemy starts doing his army, it doesn't matter if we're talking about castle age army, or in this case even hand cannoneers and bombard cannons, which is imperial age army, we're actually going to see the Cumans performing quite well here by massing knights. And yes, they can obviously try to go towards imperial age, or the Cumans can just try to finish things off playing like castle age, full castle age, sometimes even like castle versus imperial age, because that can be very powerful. On this specific game, we can see that the Turk is advancing here using both hand cannoneer and bombard cannon, pushing over the Cuman castle, while the Cuman player is just massing up knights. With the massed knights, he can basically create a big mass of knights, and if he can trade evenly at least once, he's actually going to snowball. So the Cuman player only has to break the initial siege. It doesn't matter if it's castle or imperial age siege, because on the back here, he'll actually have a much better economy. Of course, if you do break the siege at the cost of like losing 20 or 30 villagers, the game will go on. But if you do that while actually maintaining your economy safe, just by moving your villagers outside or moving them towards safer areas, this can be a very clean win. On this game, DS Ozone, a Colombian player, is actually jumping here on these hand cannoneers with his knights, and honestly, it felt like the hand cannoneer never had a chance. Indeed, the Cumans are insane. As you can see, versus an imperial age scenario, the Cuman had like all the 5 relics plus 80 villagers, twice the number of villagers from his opponent. So this is one of the uses of this civilization, and honestly, as long as we are having tournaments and a few closed maps, Cumans are always going to be a good option.